think you can help people better by just doing smaller stuff in your local communities and making a difference there. How much do you need in the bank? So you're not really bothered if things are going up and down or there's turmoil in the world. And that number's different for everyone. We have clients who come in and say, my big dream is to pay off my house. And I'll have to ask them, why? I think when it comes to the power of compound interest, the focus of it really has to be, it's more about what if you don't do anything.
This week on the Engaging Marketeer, I'm speaking with Tristan Hartey from Hartey Wealth Management. Hartey Wealth Management is a financial advice company that helps people with their investments, their wealth and their pensions. Now, Tristan isn't just a financial advisor, he is also a speaker that speaks on huge stages in front of thousands of people in as faraway places as the United States and China. So I'll be speaking to Tristan about what got him into financial advice, what his attitudes to money are, what he thinks financial education in the UK is like, and what it's like talking on such huge stages and how he manages those talks. Your industry is particularly complicated and requires a lot of analytical thought and planning and delving into certain things. What made you want to do it in the first place?
That's a really good question.
I know, I've kicked off with a cracker, haven't I?
But I won't bore you too long about. I guess. So the way that we do our business is a little bit different to most other financial planners or that sort of side. So I've always been much more a person who likes to spend time talking to people, getting to know people, understanding what makes them tick, and helping. And actually, pretty much the reason that I wanted to get into our profession was fundamentally to help people. And yes, you can do that with the analytical side. You can do all that sort of stuff. But if you can't explain it, it doesn't really mean anything. And fortunately for me, one of my skill sets, or one of my what I'd call unique abilities, is explaining things and simplifying them. The true job of someone who's a financial professional or financial advisor, to be exact, is to take complex stuff and make it easy to understand. Anyone who can't do that should probably be doing something different within the profession, but the advisors themselves should be just making complex problems simple. And I really enjoy making a complex problem simple that also then helps people. So when I sort of left university, I did international relations at the University of Leeds in 2011. I was a little unsure, what do you do with a sort of politics stroke international relations degree? But what it had taught me was sort of how to think differently and how to think from many people's points of view. So then I kind of ended up coming into this profession with that, partly because we're a family business as well. My father's been in this profession for many, many years, but I didn't join the family business. We actually set up a new business a couple of years later. And it was just something that I, in some ways, kind of semi fell into, but I always knew that I wanted to do something that allowed me to spend time listening to people, talking to people, and taking complex problems and making them simple.
So when you went to university to do that, was it politics and
international relations? Just international relations, but it's a form of politics.
International relations. What did you have in mind that you were going to be doing?
So I went to so 2008 is when I went to university. So great time to be going into university, and then 3 years later coming out into a not so booming jobs market.
Global recession, yeah.
Like the worst possible time. I kind of went in originally thinking I was really, really interested in politics. I just wanted to learn more about how it worked, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about the psychology of people, which is ultimately what the first year of university was about. The second and third years are more where you delve into like specialties of what you really enjoy. And I really enjoyed the macro sort of geopolitics stuff. So US, China, Europe, which actually obviously then very much dovetails perfectly into what we do now. And I think at the time I kind of thought, well, maybe I'll come out and maybe I'll go work in the Foreign Office or do some sort of diplomatic style work. But as I sort of came closer and closer to finishing university, I kind of realized that probably wouldn't suit me because you have to be very rigid in what you do. And I'm kind of like, once we make a decision and I make a choice on what I'm going to go do, I just go and do it. I don't really want someone telling me the 5 different reasons I can't do something or why it's going to take 10 years to get to that point. Change for me can happen straight away. So therefore, perhaps going into government wasn't really quite what I hoped it was. My thought process would say, and it would not, maybe wouldn't have been a right fit for me.
So was that
Uh,
your initial thought that you might be going into politics and potentially going into government? That's what you dreamed of?
yeah, that's what I thought as a career program.
Oh.
I like speaking, I like helping people, but I'm not necessarily sure that that's actually a way to help people these days. I think
Mm.
you can help people better by just doing smaller stuff in your local communities and making a difference there. Um, but at the time, I was very interested in sort of going, yeah, maybe I'll go down that route and see where it goes.
If we go back a little bit further, because I'm quite interested in this, because when I've given money to my three kids to go out, maybe we've gone to an arcade or something, they treat it very differently. So my eldest would never spend anything. He would keep it. Often he'd give it to his sister to look after because he knew he'd probably lose it and then get it when he came home. Whereas my youngest would try to get rid of the money as quickly as physically possible. If they could put it into the nearest slot, they would, if it would fit. And I remember when I was younger, I was told by my brother to always save money, stick it into a money box and don't spend it. And my dad always told me never pay for anything that you can't afford, save up before you buy it, so never have a credit card. Which, as it turns out, is terrible advice because you don't build up a credit rating. As your dad was in the financial industry when you were clearly growing up, what was your attitude when you were smaller towards money, spending,
Mm.
investing, and saving? And how has that changed as you got older?
Yeah, so we never really so myself and my sister was younger, and we weren't really given pocket money. It was kind of a case on if you want to make money, go and do something. So we'd do chores and stuff like that around the house, or paint fences, whatever it might be to help out. And then you're earning it in some way.
And so you had to
Um,
work for it, which
yeah,
gave you a value of the money then.
gave me value with the money. And then when I
Mm.
was at school as well, I did a couple of businesses. So anytime I had any
Of course you
money,
did. Of course you did.
there's a great one. My friend, one of my best friends, a guy called Jamie Graham. Myself and Jamie set up this thing called King Graham one lunchtime, which was basically like Burger King, but we did hot dogs and popcorn. We bought a microwave from home,
Wow.
bought a bunch of hot dogs and popcorn from the cheapest place we could find, and then made those for like 3 days until we got shut down by the authorities and also known as the school because there was no health and safety on our stuff. We were making hot dogs we'd bought from the cheapest place,
Mm.
where you could buy. But in the first, like in 3 days, we'd made £200. So our sort of view was like, this is way more entertaining and
Mm.
more interesting than just saving the money. So we saved enough to get us to start, but then took that and multiplied it, which has always been my sort of view of you can leverage things, you can build things, but there is a point in time for saving. Like with all financial plans, one of the areas that we start is we go, what's your sleep at night number? And that's basically is how much do you need in the bank? So you're not really bothered if things are going up and down or there's turmoil in the world. And that number's different for everyone. And it's very different when you're a kid. It might be £5. It doesn't really matter. But the point of it is that having that, my view on money is kind of you build your nest egg, sits on wherever it sits, and then you get everything else to start working. And that's what I do with my own money. And it's kind of what I've always done over the last 15 years since running business. And I'd say though, the first 5 to 10 years of running the business, it's more you're just reinvesting everything back into the business to get it to grow.
Mm.
You've got to have that longer term approach.
So I love stories like that. And obviously, you had the advantage that your father was very good at this and taught you the right lessons from the start. I've seen a story a couple of years ago of a kid in school who bought a load of sweets from cheap things like Poundland or Pound Stretch, whoever it was, took them into school and started selling them and started making a lot of money doing it. But then the school actually suspended him from doing this. And there was a big furor in the press that business leaders were coming out saying this kid should be applauded for what he's done, not being punished for it. And I've always had this hang up with schools that they don't teach business the way it should be done. They don't teach financial education the way it should be done because teachers don't really know about running a business because they've never done it. and they're not really in a position, no disrespect to teachers, any teachers listening, they're not really in a position to teach financial education because they are, for the best will in the world, they are earning day by day, week by week, month by month, and they're not paid a lot of money. So they're not really in a position to teach people how to manage credit, how to manage investments. Do you think more could be done, and what should be done to help kids in school to learn better knowledge of financial education?
There certainly could be more done and there should be more done. I understand the challenges around it of how do you get people to go and do this. Um, like they should change things on the curriculum. For me, the things that I think they should really teach are they should explain things like compound interest, how it works, what the actual power of that is. You don't have to go in. I don't think they need to go into things like the stock market or even property or anything like that, because then you might create a bias one way or another. But I think particularly when if it's say they're 15 and they might leave school at 16, I think they need to learn about what a credit card is and how credit card debt works. They need to learn what a mortgage is and how you go and get one. Even simple stuff like I remember when I was 18 and you leave school and I needed to open a student bank account. Now, that's not something that I was taught as a kid either, even by parents in the financial industry, because why would you think about that? But most people don't even know how to open a bank account. It's not, what do you need to open a bank account? You need things like your national insurance number. Well, if you don't know that, you'll turn up at the bank. This was back in the day, maybe now you go online. And then you'll go, oh, I haven't got my national insurance number. I don't know how to do it. And I think for me, it's more the power of explaining what is money, how it works and how it grows, the power of inflation and what it means, but really some of the simple stuff of what's debt, how does it actually work if you don't pay that debt, not to scare people, but to get them to understand it. I think you made an interesting comment before that your dad was always like, don't have debt, don't have a credit card. And that's a very British way of looking at it. We see that a lot. But I spent a lot of time in the US and they love debt. They're always saying, go and get debt, leverage it, do this, do X, Y, Z. And that it's a very much a mentality thing. In the UK, like we have clients who come in and say, my big dream is to pay off my house. And I'll have to ask them, why? Because your house doesn't make you any money. It doesn't grow any. Yeah, it grows as an asset. But if you live in it, is it really an asset?
No.
And I think that that's the sort of stuff to just get people to believe and think in. And maybe even just some simple books around financial services and they could be just things like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But like that's a great book that's easy. There's versions for kids. These should just be in the school libraries with the option for people to read. I think that would even just be a step in the right direction. Like I've done a couple of presentations in schools, but it's really hard to go into schools and talk about this stuff because you get like half an hour. You can't really explain it. They always think you're trying to sell something to someone, but you're not. You're just trying to go, this is how this works. But for me, I really think it's probably mortgages need to be explained. It's what a credit card is, how debt works, how student debt works, particularly I think now is a really topical one. But how some of these things aren't good or bad. They just are part of the world. And for me, for schools, that's what they need to be teaching. But the teachers, sadly, they're not going to have experience of this. And that's not their fault. They were never taught it either. So it's quite hard to get someone who doesn't know what they're teaching to then teach something. And I feel at the moment, the government rely on small businesses out of the kindness of their heart to hopefully come in and do this. And really, they don't have the time. And it's quite damaging in some ways because now you get people on TikTok, Instagram, whatnot, giving a load of mumbo jumbo advice that isn't really advice. It's kind of just, if you do this, you'll make 7% a year and blah, 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 blah. It's not as simple as that. Or if you do this, you'll be able to open a bank account. You really need some straight down. This is a guide almost of this is what you need to do when you are 16, 18, 21, and so on. And these are the steps you need to be at. And I think that would really help a lot of people.
I'm glad you mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because that's a classic example of that. Because I believe it was that book that goes into what's the difference between assets and liabilities.
Yes.
And as you mentioned with a home, most people think their home is an asset. but it's not, because an asset puts money into your pocket, a liability takes money out of your pocket, and a home doesn't put money into your pocket unless you rent out rooms in the home or use it as a business or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Whereas most people don't do that. So when people come to you and they say, my dream, my goal, my financial goal is to pay off my mortgage, and I hear that a lot as well. How do you, not saying tell them, how do you get across the message that paying off the mortgage might not necessarily be the best thing for them?
So one of the things that we do and really focus on is the emotion of money. So we try to work out what is someone's emotional connection to money. So that's why I would always ask, so why do you want to pay off your mortgage? Now, if someone says to me, well, because that's what you do, or I want to save some interest, then it's a different conversation because I can go, okay, well, if you invest or you do this, you'll actually make more than the interest. You'll still be able to pay the mortgage off. You'll just pay it off at the end of the term, but you'll have made more than the cost. They're much easier to deal with. It's more when people are just going, I really don't like having debt. Now that comes from a deeper seated place when it comes to emotion. And my job isn't to persuade people to do something that makes them uncomfortable. It's to try to create a plan that hopefully makes them comfortable, but is also best for them. So with someone like that, it might be rather than going, okay, look, currently you want to pay it off in 10 years earlier. Maybe we go for somewhere in the middle. Put a little bit into investments so you've got something at the end, but also you can pay it off earlier. Or you take your bonuses and pay it off earlier if you're getting bonuses or something along those lines, rather than making it the sole aim is to pay it off. Because ultimately, until you sell that property, it's not making you any money. And realistically, when you sell it, you have no idea how much it's going to make you. Like, you don't know if it's going to, when someone says, I bought a house 30 years ago and I made X amount on it, it's like, you didn't make anything. You got lucky. You were able to buy a house 30 years ago when they were a fraction of the price, and they've gone through the greatest housing boom in history. I can almost guarantee the next 30 years are not going to be like the previous 30. So if your store of wealth idea is to build it through holding on to an asset, the people are probably going to be quite disappointed in 20 or 30 years' time. Because if we had a housing boom the same way that we've had now, the average house price is going to be about 1.5 million pounds. It's just not going to happen. So it's how you get people to pay attention there. But it's ultimately, it all comes down to the emotion and what that deep-seated emotion's in, which is why the Rich Dad, Poor Dad side works really well. He did a board game many years ago that I used to play as a kid.
I've got it. I've played it.
Yeah, which is a great game. It's all about getting out the rat race and all that sort of stuff.
Cash Flow 101.
Yeah, and then they did one called Cash Flow for Kids, which was a bit of an easier version of it, which still wasn't easy. I preferred Monopoly. That was much easier. But it was great because it taught you everything, and you were randomized what your job was going to be and things like that. So the reason for making it randomized for the job was make sure that anyone can get out of the rat race, as they call it. But I don't think there's as much focus at the moment on that type of education, and there probably should be more of it. But I don't know where that's going to come from. I would like to say the government or whichever government it is ends up getting there, but I don't think they will. I think it's down to individuals and small businesses.
Well, I did a podcast earlier this week talking to a lady that's just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, about the conspiracy theory that I've heard and she'd heard as well, that there's a cure for cancer already. It's just been suppressed because there's no money in curing. There's only money in treating. There's another theory along the lines of that really the government doesn't want to educate people in how to handle debt. It doesn't want to educate people in financial education because it needs people to be poor. It needs people to be in menial tasks. It needs people to have overdrafts because that's what keeps the banks going. That's what keeps the government going. So there's nothing in it really for them to educate people. We don't want a nation of entrepreneurs all doing well, because if we're all doing well, nobody is. What's your thought on that nonsense?
I'm not sure any of that's true, but I will say, I think the thing is, if everyone wanted to be an entrepreneur, we'd all be wired the same, and we're not. We are wired differently, which is a good thing, because if everyone was the same, it'd be boring. But we're all wired differently. So even if the education was there will be plenty of people, I think, who still wouldn't want to take that risk. The majority of people don't want the risk of am I going to get paid at the end of the day or at the end of the week or the end of the month? Am I okay with a fluctuating income, which ultimately all entrepreneurs have to be, particularly in the early days, because you have no idea what's coming in. But I really think that I would say it's probably more of a. I think there's an element as well. You've got to remember, a percentage of people will just not want to learn. They don't want to listen. They don't want to do any of that, and maybe they won't learn in that certain way. I think it ultimately fundamentally comes down to, in the government, they don't have enough money to do certain things, so they've got to go one way or the other and focus on whatever it is that they want to focus on. So I think financial education, sadly, just isn't being done properly. I will say that so our regulator, the FCA, are doing a bit more around this, but their biggest thing at the moment is that they're having like influencers or finfluencers, I think they're called,
Influencers.
financial influencers who are not qualified, who are out there spouting nonsense. But our regulator has started to crack down on them because if I did a video, I have to put like reams and reams of this is not financial advice, this is this, this is this, this is this. And it ends up being kind of just too long to really do much. Whilst other people can go on a whiteboard, draw something, say it looks all right, and go, if you do that, you'll be fine. But they're not regulated, they're not qualified, but they do have a place because they're at least making people go, okay, maybe I should do a bit more research. I'm learning a little bit more. So information is becoming freer, which I think should trickle down, but it's not going to come from the government. It's going to just be actively, slowly pushed down. But I don't think there's necessarily any evidence that they're trying to keep everyone poor. I think they'd rather everyone be succeeding because then they'd take more tax. So
Well, they are taking more tax, particularly from small businesses.
yes, they are.
Yeah. But, we won't go into that because that's just going to turn into a rant fest. You mentioned finfluencers, which is the first time I've heard that phrase, but I love it, by the way. What's your thoughts on the biggest finfluencer out there, Martin Lewis?
I think Martin Lewis has done a really good job on explaining how people can save money. He's really good at saving money. His recent forays into more financial, like in investing and stuff, I think he's walking a tight line there because if you start recommending products or you start recommending providers, that's advice. And also sometimes and I'm not going to go deep into the differences between passive, active investing and all this sort of stuff. But if you buy cheap, you'll do fine when things are going well, but you won't when they're going badly. And it's all to do with timescales at that point. And I feel that some of the more recent stuff Martin Lewis has been saying is useful, but it's not clear enough and therefore leads to people making decisions badly when they do it themselves. There is a massive advice gap in the UK. Like ultimately, most people can't afford a financial advisor, so there needs to be something there to help people in that sort of lower end. And I think Martin Lewis does a really good job at explaining things like credit cards, how mortgages work, like how to save some money on your energy bill. That sort of stuff. I think he does a fantastic job. And I think he did a good job recently. He did a one about just explaining inheritance tax and the value of being married, which I thought was really good because it encourages people to have that conversation around the differences and how it works, but also that most people still think inheritance tax is only going to affect the ultra rich. It's really not anymore. It affects, by the time we reach 2030, I think I read a stat recently, and it might be wrong, but this is the stat I read, is that they think it's going to affect just shy of 20% of the population. And that's not a small number anymore. That's a decent size. And bearing in mind, many countries in the world do not have inheritance tax, such as Australia,
Really?
do not have inheritance tax. New Zealand do not have inheritance tax. The US does, but only when you go past $13 million do you start paying inheritance tax.
Wow.
So ours is very low down. So whether you think it's a good or a bad thing, there is definitely an argument for it's a bit too low. And people might wonder why are wealthy people leaving the country? Well, when you've got an inheritance tax limit set at £1 million for a couple, and yet property values have gone up by X amount and more people are getting caught out, it's no real surprise people are leaving.
Wow.
But I do think Martin Lewis as a whole does a good job because he's probably the best. But yet again, he's educating people, not the government.
I didn't know that. Okay. You mentioned earlier about a financial advisor should be able to explain something simply, and you touched on compound interest. So let's put you to the test. Could you explain simply how compound interest works?
Been a long time since I've done that. So let me just try and I'll try and word it in a 60-second style pitch, I think, or not that I do those very often, but it's
I've heard.
so I think when it comes to the power of compound interest, the focus of it really has to be, it's more about what if you don't do anything. So let's say you put £1 into your money box. In a year's time, that will be worth £1. The problem is, will that £1 still buy you the same thing that you wanted to buy last year? And the answer is probably no, because what used to cost you £1 is now going to cost you £1, 2 pence. We therefore need to make it grow. So let's say you were to put it in the bank to keep it really simple. It goes into a bank account, and that bank account makes 5% a year. You've now got £1, 5 pence. The following year, if that makes another 5%, it doesn't make 5p, it makes 6p. So now you're at £1.11. And if we keep going and rolling on continuously, you end up increasing the money exponentially because it's an exponential amount on top of each pound. And the easiest way to sometimes look at that is look at it as a doubling effect. If you started with £1 and you doubled it for 30 days, the numbers are absolutely astronomical. Because you go £1, £2 on day 2, £4 on day 3, £8, 16, 32. It just keeps going and going and going. And that's the power of compound interest. Now, most things don't double, which is why I gave you the smaller sort of example before. But compound interest is kind of like, it's one of the wonders of the world that nobody pays attention to. And it's kind of, it all leads back to, if you want to think about when in athletics or cycling or football teams, and they say we want to improve by 1%. But if they've improved by 1% for every training session, it compounds. They get better and better and better, and that's why they end up being the best.
Interesting. Do you know, in our industry, we actually use, or sometimes Ryan certainly uses compound interest as an example when describing SEO to clients. Because if you're improving your website and adding content to your website, it's not something that disappears. It adds and adds and adds, and the SEO will build. So if you look at a traffic graph, for example, or for a website that has pay-per-click, it will be constant until you stop using the pay-per-click, and then it will stop. But if you do the SEO, it'll be gradual, and it'll build and build and build and build, and then keep going up like a skyrocket, and it will pass pay-per-click by huge numbers at a certain point. And it's very similar to the way compound interest works. So thank you for that explanation. That's pretty cool. Let's look at what you do in your business. Now, you mentioned that you like speaking. Clearly, you are a very good public speaker. I know you go around the world and deliver talks. What sort of training have you had in doing that, or has you just naturally got up and been able to do that?
So I've never had any real formal training. I've done a little bit. I've watched a lot of people, watched a lot of videos and stuff, but I've never had any formal training other than when I was at school. I did a couple of like English speaking board exams, which is more learning how to do like monologues and stuff like that. Did a little bit of acting at school, just plays. And I think that helps, particularly with cadence. But I look at video. I used to watch videos of myself doing speeches like 10, 15 years ago to try to see where am I going wrong. And we, as a business, one of the ways that we get business, obviously we use SEO, we use word of mouth, but we also do in-person events. So we've done, on average, we do 12 a year, but at one point we were doing 24 a year. The good thing about those is I'm speaking for an hour each time. You get a lot of practice. And when I started, I used to I'd shift around on my feet a lot. Let's just like go. And actually, one of the key things I tried to focus on was just get rid of all that. Slow down, be comfortable with silence, don't shuffle. I have learned recently that I'm much more I like to walk and talk. So when I'm on stage or presenting, I'll move up and down a bit. That's just my style. I never like to have a handheld microphone. I use my hands a lot when I'm talking, but it's about cadence and speed. And that's kind of what I learned and was told. I've always asked for feedback as well from other professional speakers that I know. Some of them are some of the world's best speakers, in my opinion, and they're charging 100,000 for a speech, and you're kind of going, well, tell me what it is that makes you so great, other than your content. Obviously, that's a given. It's how do you do that? And for me, it's really to be engaging. You've just got to be deliberate with your words, not too fast, but not too slow, and it's just trying to cut out all of those ums, ahs, and so on. But there's another funny thing about it is one thing I was told was don't appear too polished. So sometimes it's better, you need to have that little bit back. I've done a lot of talks that are teleprompted, but also ones that aren't. And in some ways, I prefer the teleprompted, in others, I don't. Because with a teleprompter, it's very hard to go off course and feel as natural because it looks like you're reading. Whilst with a natural talk, you can go off on tangents, but as long as you land back on the timing, it's okay. But in terms of training, I've had a little bit. I've suggested people go to things like Toastmasters and stuff like that before if they want to learn. I think if you've never been comfortable with it, to me, it's insane that people get more worried about standing up in front of a crowd than they do death. What's the worst that's going to happen? As long as you don't stand up and start swearing, you should be okay. Because everyone understands that you're nervous.
Unless that's your brand, of course. Standing up and
Yes.
swearing is your thing. Yeah.
Which can be for some people, for some speakers as well. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I mean, it's like you wouldn't want to stand up at a professional function, and it's okay as long as you don't freeze and you just speak. Most people are going to be understanding that you're nervous. You're allowed to be. And if you're not nervous at all, it probably means you don't care, which means you shouldn't be doing it. For me, no matter what, whenever I go out and do any form of talk, any sort of presentation, I always have a couple of minutes before where I get a little nervous, I get a little bit sweaty, and I'm like, this is the right thing because it means I care. I've done one where I had a terrible performance and I wasn't nervous. I went in thinking it'll be fine, and I just didn't really care. And that said to me as well, when I'm choosing what I want to talk about, I have to make sure I'm passionate on the topic. Not just taking it because someone wants to hear me speak.
See, I've done some bad talks before, and for me, it's never because I've not cared. It's because I've not prepared enough, and I absolutely hate being crap during a talk, and it's always because I've not prepared or I've been overconfident and thought, oh, I've got this, I can improvise a bit, and you can't. You can't do that. Whereas the most prepared I've ever been was when I did a TEDx talk, and I was word for word exactly what I wanted to do, and it went absolutely perfectly. So yeah, I think preparation is key. So when you're doing the talks that don't have the teleprompter, because I'm curious about this, because different people learn in different styles, and you said you've done acting, so you might be okay to do this. Some people write the script and they learn it and they know it word for word, and in your head you can read it. It's not there, but you're physically reading it. Or are you delivering the talk based on topics that you know, so you know your start, you know key points, but everything else is sort of made up around it? What sort of style do you go for?
So I build it into a bit of it's kind of like I build it into acts as such. So as if it was a play. So the first act is always the bit, I call it the James Bond moment. So you think about the start of every James Bond film, you don't see the title credits, do you, at the very start?
No.
You see an action scene. So I always start with a story. And it doesn't matter what the story's about, but it'll be something that's probably linked to my own personal experience within what I'm talking about. And that's because a story captures the audience straight away. It brings them in. So the first act isn't even really me going, this is what I'm going to talk to you about. It's this is my experience or an experience of someone I know told in a story form until we get to X point. Then I start going, now here's what I'm going to talk to you about. Here's what we're going to go through and so on. And then that gets broken down into the meat and bones of it. And normally what I do at the very end is I have it lined up that somehow I'm going to loop it back to the original story at the start. Because if I can do that, it becomes a full circle. And it's ultimately, I'm telling people what they're going to learn. But people remember, when it comes to speaking, people remember the beginning and they remember the end. They might get a load of notes out of the middle, but they don't necessarily remember how it made them feel. And it's the same with any form of advice or anything like that. People remember how they feel when they leave. They remember how they feel when they arrived, and they remember how they feel when they leave. The middle bit, it's important. But if you think about all great films, the middle bit, there's always a little bit of a drag in there where you're going, okay, let's get to it.
Let's get to the car chase. Come on.
Well, I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, and it's like in the second film, when Merry and Pippin are messing around in the forest, you're like, can we just get back to the other bit? I love the Ents, everyone does, but there's a point where you're going, let's get out of the way. Let's get to the next bit. And I think it's within a talk, that's something that you have to be aware of, that there will always be bits that don't resonate. I had some feedback recently on a talk I gave around recruitment in financial services, and 90% of it was really good feedback. Because I got it written down as feedback. And one person went, because my key thing was, if you're a financial advisor, you shouldn't be doing recruitment, hire a recruiter, which I think is pretty good advice. Get people who know what they're doing to do what they do, and you do what you do. And this person wrote down, Tristan openly admits he doesn't know how to do recruitment. Why is he talking about recruitment? And I was like, no, you've missed the entire point. The process, I opened with a story that said, this is my experience with us doing recruitment ourselves and how it went wrong. So here's how we fixed it. And then I went through our process exactly of how we fixed it. But for some people, they're never going to get it. And not everyone's going to like when you speak. But it is useful to have that feedback to go, okay, it is what it is. But I think for me, I build it, as I said, I build it as if it was like a film. And the key part is start with that James Bond moment. The first 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is, make it something that captures the audience and makes them go, okay, I'm glad I'm here. At least I've heard an interesting story.
I'm so glad you said that, because I completely agree with that. That the opening line of any talk, I'd say, is the most important most important part that you can do, because it's what makes the audience decide whether or not they're going to listen to you.
Yeah.
And
and never, ever, 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 ever finish with thank you is another one. Never do that. Just end and finish. Never go thank you, because it kills the ending. If you're trying to make a really powerful point, you wouldn't say thank you at the end.
No, you end on the point.
Bow, do whatever you want, do something else. Just don't verbalize thank you, in my opinion.
I think worse than ending with thank you is any questions.
Yeah, never take questions.
As if you're going to do questions, get them in the middle. Or
it depends on the size
three quarters the way through. Yeah, depending on the type of event you're doing. But then make sure you then take back control of it and you control the finish.
Yeah.
And those last words are yours. And then you go.
Definitely.
No, thank you.
And if you build your talk into like acts or chapters, you can have break points for those questions with the chapters.
Yeah.
So it allows you to sort of go through it all. And yeah, it's just, you get a thrill out of, I love speaking. I love going out and doing that side. I guess it's no real difference to me if I'm talking to 2 people or I'm talking to 5. Well, my biggest audience has been 7,500. So there's no real, to me, there is a little bit more nervousness around a lot more people, but you can only see the first 4 rows. Yeah. So it never feels like you're going past 300-400.
How do you, I was going to ask, what about that audience of 7,500 or so? Where was that, and what was that event?
So I did that for the $1 Million Roundtable at their global conference in Macau in China. And I did one earlier in the year, actually, in Miami, which was to 6,000. So you also have to combat the issue of translation there. I was being translated into 8 different languages. Wow. So everything has to be slower because the translators are translating you in real time. It also means if you tell a joke, you get this really odd wave of laughter. It starts at the front or wherever the English speakers are, and it's like a weird Mexican wave throughout the crowd because Japanese takes longer to translate than Mandarin or Thai, and then it's all over the place. So you just have to kind of slow it right down. Wow. For that, it's all about preparation. I was up at like 3 in the morning on the day of it, just going over and over and over and over again the talk
Yeah.
because you don't want to mess it up. Although I'll be honest, when you're stood backstage on on a production of that size, the thing you worry most about is don't trip over when you're walking onto the stage because the stage is huge.
Yeah.
It's the stage is just it'll be like half the length of a football field in size with massive screens and so on. So you kind of my main concern was don't fall over and hit your mark because they have a mark that they want you to stand on because that's where the camera is going to be pointing.
And for something like that, are you using slides as well?
Yep. Yeah, so I'll have slides. They have confidence monitors and all that sort of stuff. But I only normally try to. So if I'm doing, say, a 10-minute talk, I'll probably only want 2 or 3 slides. Because with larger audience events, even events where it's maybe 1,000 or 500, a lot of the time the camera is going to be focused on you so that people at the back can see you. So actually putting up slides is a bit of a distraction.
Yeah.
And like I said, with translation issues, the slides can only be in one language. I know that they can translate them through AI and stuff like that, but it means the question then is how much use are the slides?
Absolutely. And when you're doing talks like that, what's the commercial purpose or goal behind you doing them?
So there's 2 parts. One, the organization MDRT that I'm volunteering for, because it's a volunteer thing, I'm not being paid for those ones, it's a way to give back to the profession, to share ideas with people around the world that hopefully inspire people to make a change in a positive way. I guess from a commercial side, there is the benefit that we come back to our sleepy little shire in Cheshire and Shropshire, where we're based, and I can turn around and people can, and maybe we'll do a press release or we'll put it in our newsletter or something, and we'll say, you spoke at this conference in China to 7,500 people. Has your financial advisor done that? And the answer is probably going to be no.
More than likely, it's going to be no, yeah.
So there is a little bit of that. But I like giving back a lot. I like to be able to, particularly within our profession, which is a worldwide profession, not just a UK-based profession. It's nice to be able to give back and educate other people and maybe give ideas and inspire, like, although I'm not that old, but it's like the next generation. The average age of advisors in, say, Asia is around about sort of like 31.
Really?
They're much younger. Whilst in the UK, I think the average age is about 62 now.
Yeah.
So it's a nice bit to be able to look at where things are going. And I learn a lot out of these conferences myself because I get to watch all the other speakers, take notes and bring that back to our business and apply it into the business and hopefully improve processes or, marketing ideas or whatever it might be.
Well, in terms of your business, as you've just pretty briefly mentioned that there, let's talk a little bit about that because it's only fair if we talk about Hartey Wealth Management, I think. What sort of clients do you work with and what sort of things do you do to help them?
Yeah, so we mostly look after clients age sort of 50-ish up to age 90. It's quite a wide gap. So it's people in or approaching retirement. Quite a common one we get is someone comes in and they're like 50 and they're going, got 20 grand in my pension. Can I retire in 5 years? And the answer is obviously no. But let's create a plan around that. So we're helping people go from there to where they need to get to. Most of our clients, though, are probably are retiring or retired. Generally, people who were high-earning professionals, non-public sector, mostly, because they're very good pensions anyway. We've got a lot of business owners, quite a lot of multi-generational families that we deal with. So we'll try to look after the whole family all the way down. We've got one where they've got 5 generations now. Wow. So we've got like the great-grandparents, the grandparents, the parents, their children and their grandchildren. So it's all the way down. And we're making sure that we're protecting their assets and investing it with a family mentality rather than an individual mentality. But yeah, so we're also doing, general investments and so on. We are a little different in that we also have our own discretionary fund management company, which means that side is the company that chooses the funds. Most advisors will do the plan and then they'll pass on the actual investment side to someone else to make the decisions. So because we have that in-house, that does make us a bit different because we've got the extra qualification level to do that. And it also means that everyone knows who's making the decisions, rather than if you give your money to someone and they go and use a DFM, which they will go and do. You've never met that DFM, so you have no idea what their investment philosophy is. It doesn't mean it's wrong, because the advisor is going, the advisor's job is actually to make the plan, not necessarily, and to enact it, but not necessarily to build all of it. But we decided as a firm about 7 years ago that we really wanted to make sure that we were doing it all ourselves, because if it goes wrong, the person who will get blamed is us. Now, I don't mind that, but I want to make sure that if it goes wrong, it was our fault, not someone else's fault, and then I get blamed.
Yeah. So are you involved with actually the funds yourself, or is that?
Yep, I'm involved on the investment committee within that side as well. So we help create the portfolios. I sit on the investment committee, so I sit with our portfolio managers, and then we're choosing all the different funds. One of the benefits of our DFM as well is that because we're buying in bulk, and we do have other firms using us as well, that allows us to get reductions in costs from the actual funds themselves. So we're getting it at institutional rates rather than individual rates, which does make a big difference when you're starting to really look at some of these companies that many of them need, say, 100 million before they'll even say you can have a discount. Well, we can negotiate that at a lower level than that, but also we can now offer this back to a normal investor who wants to put £5,000 in that fund, but they'll get it at the institutional rate. But yeah, so from my side, I sit on the investment committee, so we help make the decisions on what's going to happen and what's not going to happen and so on.
So presumably you're profiling your clients as well to work out what their attitude to risk is and what they're willing to do. How do you then divvy up? And we obviously can't get too specific, but how do you then divvy up what investment goes where? What sort of split are you doing on portfolios?
Yeah, so we have essentially we have 5 types of portfolios. We have like a defensive, cautious, balanced, adventurous, and then we call our high risk one dynamic. Dynamic sounds fun.
Everybody wants to be dynamic, don't they?
Yeah. Normally, when they see how punchy it is, they don't. Okay. Most sit between the cautious, balanced, and adventurous. So we do that based on a split between equities and other assets. So let's say a balanced fund would be 50% in the market and 50% out. And because they're in what's called an MPS, so a model portfolio service, anyone who's in the balanced is in the same funds as someone who's in the adventurous or the dynamic. It's just different weightings. The way the analogy I like to use is, it's like when you go for a curry, you're trying to decide how spicy you want something to be.
Right.
Now, if you want a korma, order a korma. You don't want to take the risk. If you want something really spicy, you'd go with a vindaloo or something like that. And it's the same with investing. It's how spicy do you want it to be? Because the risk element is ultimately you will make more in the higher risk over a longer term period. But if you've only got 5 years to go, you don't want to be having the risk that there'll be a stock market crash. You have to protect it more by utilizing bonds, absolute return funds, gold, silver, although we just got out of gold and silver, but that was about 5 weeks ago before it all went down quite dramatically. But you need counterweights and things like that. And our job is to manage that for the client, see them once a year so that we can adjust the plan according to their life circumstances.
So by that, I understand if someone has a much larger length of time before they need to retire, maybe they're in their 30s, then would you guide them towards a higher risk profile because they've got the time to be able to cope with any potential downfall in that?
Yes, providing that they've got the relevant cash assets behind them that they're happy with. That sleep at night that I mentioned earlier on. They need to be, it's also although they might, so within their pension, yes, they should be higher risk because they're ultimately going to be missing out on returns if they went low risk. But let's say they want to buy a house in 5 years. Well, that's a different conversation. That money shouldn't be in the same place. So something that we will do is we'll have people in different risk profiles based on what their target goals are. And sometimes cash is the right thing to do.
Or just keeping it in cash?
If it's a short enough time period, yes. Don't mess about with it. We've got we've had clients in the past who've done they've maybe sold businesses and they've got a tax bill coming up. It's 11 months away. We'll put it in what's called a money market fund, which is basically like a cash tracking style fund. We've got 11 months. We can't afford to lose anything.
Yeah.
It's about just making sure it's safe and making enough to balance out with inflation.
Yeah. Interesting. So if someone is thinking of investing, what's the minimum they would require to start off on an investing journey?
To start off on an investing journey, ultimately, I'd say it's if you want to do it yourself or you want to do it with like a low cost style provider, just start trying to put £50 away. Just do anything. Anything is better than nothing. Whether it needs to be in a pension or an ISA or something called a general account or a bond is almost irrelevant. They're just boxes. That's what the advice side's for. But if you're not doing anything right now, it's work out if there's any little bits you can cut out and just start putting a little bit away. Because the problem is, if you don't start now, you're not going to get that compounding effect.
Yeah.
And compounding only works over time. It's going to sound a little bit flippant to say, but the hardest number to get to in investing is £100,000. That takes ages. If you're putting, say, £500 a month away, on average, it's going to take about 10-ish years with compounding at, say, 7% to get to 100 grand. The thing is, if you kept putting £500 away every month after that, it's about 5 years to then go from 100 grand to 200. It's then 3 years from 200 to 300. And it builds a lot quicker. The hardest number, though, is get to that first 100,000.
Yeah. I was offered a company pension when I worked at Game, and I would have been 24 at the time. And they were putting, I think they were match fund, I think it was 50% they were putting in back in a time when you didn't have to do that. But I turned it down because I wanted the money there and then. I was young. And I think that's probably the stupidest mistake I've made from a financial investing perspective over the years. So I didn't actually start my pension until we started Engage Web. I'm pretty sure that's it. So that was 2009. So I'd have been about 33, something like that. I've been all right since, but obviously I've been putting money in as I'm older. So I'm not going to get that compounding effect that you talk about. Whereas my youngest is 21 and he works at Amazon works in the night shift as a manager. Even at 21, he's got over 10 grand in his pension. So he's in a far better position than I am because he's done it at 21 because of the success he's going to have. So I think the key there is the earlier you can start, the better. Don't wait.
And this is something for parents as well, or grandparents. You can put money in a pension for a child when they're born.
Yeah.
And that could be £10 a month. Now, it's not going to be massive when they hit 20, but what it will do is it gives them a start. And then it becomes their problem.
Well, I heard another financial advisor talk about this. I can't remember the numbers. I mean, you may know the story or the example. Is if you put, I think it was £20 a month or £10 a month into a child's pension fund when they're born, by the time they turn 65, it's over £1 million.
Yeah. It'll be the £20 a month one, that one. Yeah, it is. And it's crazy because it's just the power of time and compound interest. It's crazy when you think about it. Because it'll just grow and grow and grow. But it gives you an extra 20 years if someone does it for you when you're born. It will literally kickstart them 20 years ahead of everyone else. Now, with a pension, obviously they can't access it, but you could do it into a junior ISA or something along those lines. The key is start early and it will make a big difference. But I think the reason that a lot of people give up is they do it for, say, 2 or 3 years and they go, it's not doing anything. And the answer is, yeah, of course it's not doing anything. It might grow by 10% one of those years, but 10% on very little doesn't look like much. 10% on £600 is 60 quid. And that's why people then give up going, this investing malarkey is not really worth it. There's also the danger now of instant success, which I think has come from the our shortened attention spans around everything, where we all go, if I don't make 100% over in 2 weeks, it's a failure. And you're like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
That's just luck. Whilst when you look at, like, most business owners will understand, it's about that slow increase over the number of years.
And with the fluctuations you see on cryptocurrencies as well. But
I heard a great saying recently about cryptocurrency. This came from a UK fund manager who said to me, because I asked him, why has it stopped going? What's going on with it? And he goes, oh, it's going down because it stopped going up. And I was like, yeah, that's right. Actually, that's it.
he's not wrong. He's not wrong.
Like, there's no underlying asset to it. There's no correlation. It doesn't. It is what it is. It's a speculative asset.
One question I want to ask before we wrap up, and feel free not to answer this. Where do you invest your money?
So I utilize our own portfolios. So I do a pretty similar approach to how we do financial planning. So we have three buckets. I have some that is sat in cash, and it's going to sound odd to say this, premium bonds.
Really? Premium bonds?
Yeah, not much, but a little bit just sat there because it's safe money.
It's very old
It makes
school.
a little, and they're actually a good place if you just want something safe. It's fully protected, and you'll make a little bit. So I have a bit sat there. That's my sort of rainy day fund. We have our myself and my wife have our plans on what we're going to do over the next like 2, 3, 5, 10 years. That's in like more accessible stuff like my ISA, her ISA, stuff like that. And that's sort of medium risk.
So you can get at it if you need it, but you'd rather leave
Yeah.
it there. Yeah.
But I'd rather leave it there. And then my pension and other longer term style investments, like we do have a property and stuff like that as well, because you should have diversification, is all high risk because I can't touch it for years. I try my best to max out as much as I can. And it's just a case on building, and then that's 25 years away. I won't look at it. I think one of the big things people do with their investments these days too much is they look at it too much. So with a pension or an ISA, you put your fingerprint on your phone, you can look at the value. And the question I always ask people is, how often do you check the value of your house? You're not doing it every day, are you? And it's exactly the same. Unless you intend to sell it, don't look at it too often.
Yeah.
Otherwise
Of course, if you register your house with Zoopla, it'll email you every month with the value of your house, which of course
Yes, it will now,
it's
which
a finger in the air value anyway, and it's absolutely bollocks. But they will email you with a value.
Yeah. Which you can look once a month at your pension
Yeah.
if you've done the Zoopla thing as well. I've done the Zoopla thing for my property, and I swear I have no idea where it's getting those numbers.
No,
And it's a pretty wide range as well. It's
it
like,
is a
could be
very
this,
wide range. Yeah,
could be this, might be in the middle. I'm like, you have no idea, do you?
not a clue. No, no. And to be honest, a house is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it.
Yeah, and which is why, coming back to what I was saying before, there is always an discussion around
I love that. We talked about bringing something back in the talk, and we've literally done it during this, going back to the original of the value of the house and paying off the mortgage. Fantastic. Tristan, if someone's listening to this thinking, I'd love to find out more about you, I'd love to find out more about Hartey Wealth Management, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Well, it's there's a couple of ways. One, they can come to our website, and if there's a get in touch page there, they can email us that way and so on, or pick up the phone and give us a call. We love doing face-to-face meetings still. We're a bit odd. So we will, in this modern day, so we will still do those. Or the other option is we actually have a number of books that are available on Amazon that have all our contact details in, but they're reference style books. So if someone wants to know all about inheritance tax or retirement planning, if they contact us, we can send them a book, or they can just buy it and all the proceeds will go to charity anyway.
Fantastic. I will put the link to the website. I'll put the contact details, the phone number. I'll put your LinkedIn as well, if that's okay,
Yeah,
underneath
that'd
this.
be great. Thank you.
And I'll put some links to some of the Amazon books as well below the podcast. So if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify, scroll down. It's in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description. Tristan, thank you very much for being a guest on the podcast. I've learned a lot today.
No, thank you, Darren. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.